In this video, we're going to talk about the 6 methods for solving limits. The method that you use is going to first be based off what the type of limit you are taking is. So we could either have the limit as x is going to a positive infinity or negative infinity, or we could have x going to some constancy. So it could be x going to 1, x going to -2, x going to 4.5. If x is going to a number, we're going to treat it differently than x going to positive or negative infinity. And although going to infinity seems like it would be more complicated, that's actually the easier case. So if you have a limit as x goes to infinity, the first thing you are thinking about is you just want to compare the degree of the numerator n with the degree of the denominator d. So the degree is the highest power of x, and you want to look at what's the highest power of x in the top of a fraction versus what's the highest power of x in the bottom of a fraction. And this is going to give you your cases, which tell you the value of a limit as x goes to infinity. So the first best case scenario for these limits at infinity is you compare the degree of the numerator to the degree of the denominator, and the degree of the denominator is higher. So that means the bottom has a higher degree. We're just going to call this bottom heavy. And this is our best case scenario. It's the best case scenario because you don't have to do any work. The answer is just 0. Bottom heavy is the best. The answer is always 0. So if we look at an example of this, you'd have the limit as x goes to either positive or negative infinity. It doesn't matter. And as long as the degree of the denominator is higher, so we could have x squared minus 5 over 3x to the 4th plus 1. So comparing these degrees, the degree of the numerator is 2. That's the highest power of x up there. The degree of the denominator is 4, so this is bottom heavy. The answer is just going to be 0. And that's because as x goes to infinity, we're dividing something small by something huge. So bottom heavy means you have more in the denominator. So it's like if we had more people than cookies. If I brought one cookie and we said we're going to share it with every single person in a town, and the town has 30,000 people, we'd take that one cookie divided by 30,000, nobody would even taste a crumb. Bottom heavy is the best. The answer is always 0. You're dividing something small by something huge, you don't have enough left. So it's just nice because the answer is right there for you. The second best case is you compare the degree of the numerator to the degree of the denominator, and they're equal. They both have x to the 7th. So 7 is the degree of the top and the bottom. This is our next best case just because it's another fast one to solve. You take the ratio of leading coefficients. These are the same rules from algebra if you remember the rules for horizontal asymptotes. Very similar. So if we have the limit as x goes to infinity, and we have 3x minus 4x to the 7th, and then we have 6x to the 7th plus 8. So I notice the degree of the top, n, is 7, and the degree of the denominator is also 7. They have the same exact degree. The highest power of x is the same in the top and the bottom. We are just going to think about what is the leading coefficient. So we're just going to look at the number next to x, the highest power. In the top, it's -4, and in the bottom, it's 6. So my answer is going to be -4 over 6, which does reduce to be -2/3. So not too hard, but definitely not as easy as bottom heavy. It's just being 0. The worst case scenario for limits at infinity, well, we've already talked about 2 cases. One where the denominator is higher, one when they're the exact same number, and then the last case is if the numerator is higher. So this is top heavy. The numerator has a higher degree than the denominator. The answer is either infinity or negative infinity. right? You have something huge divided by something smaller. So if I brought in $50 billion to a town and I said, we're going to take this $50 billion and divide it by 30,000, everybody would be rich. We'd all be pretty well off. So that's the idea with top heavy. You're dividing something huge by something small. You're still going to be way up at infinity or down at negative infinity. And to figure out which infinity you're at, you're going to divide all terms by x to the highest power cross out any bottom heavy terms because they're just going to go to 0 anyway, and plug into what's left over. To figure out, is it positive infinity or negative infinity that you're going to? So we're going to take all terms and divide them by x to the highest power, cross out what's bottom heavy, and plug into what's left over. The key part is divide by highest power of x in the denominator. So you're looking for x to the highest power, but it has to be in the denominator. So looking at something that's top heavy, you'd have to have the limit as x goes to infinity to even apply these rules. So I'm going to say x is going to negative infinity. And in the top, we have x to the 10th minus 3x to the 4th over 2x to the 8th plus 1. So the degree of the top here is 10, and the degree of the bottom is 8. So this is a top-heavy case. Our worst-case scenario, just because we have to do some work. So if we look at dividing all terms by x to the highest power in the denominator, we're not going to take the 2 coefficient. We're just going to take that x to the 8th. It's still going to be the limit as x goes to negative infinity, but we're going to take x to the 10th and divide it by x to the 8th. We're going to have minus 3x to the 4th divided by x to the 8th over 2x to the 8th divided by x to the 8th plus 1 over x to the 8th. And anything bottom heavy here is just going to go to 0 as x is going to infinity. So in the top, we have that x to the 4th divided by x to the 8th. There's not enough to go around. That's just going to go to 0. In the bottom, we have 1. If we divide that by negative infinity to the 8th power, we are not going to have enough to go around. That's going to go to 0. So what we're truly left with in the top, dividing bases means subtracting power. So we'll have x to the 10 minus 8. We're going to have x squared. And in the bottom, we have 2x to the 8th over x to the 8th. That's just going to be 2. The x to the 8th will just cancel. And now we can plug into what's left over and figure out, is our answer positive infinity or negative infinity? So it's x going to negative infinity, so I'm going to replace x with negative infinity. It's getting squared. And then it's being divided by 2. So negative infinity times negative infinity is going to be positive infinity, so it's going to turn positive when we square it. And then when you divide it by 2, it's going to stay at positive infinity. So lots of work for top heavy compared to the other two cases. So bottom heavy is the best. The answer is always 0. Equal, take that ratio of leading coefficients. I usually just circle the numbers next to x to the highest power and make them into a fraction. That's that ratio part. And then bottom heavy, or top heavy rather, you have it narrowed down. That answer is either infinity or negative infinity. You just need to divide everything by x to the highest power in the denominator to figure out which one it is.